Hello, welcome back to the ministry. God brought my attention to something that I didn't really think about while I was doing something yesterday. I was washing my hair and styling my hair yesterday, and the Lord kind of brought my attention to having a balanced working relationship with your partner. A lot of you are called into God ordained relationships. And because you're called into God ordained relationships, you're not just called to be the housewife that's going to be at home. A lot of you are very gifted, very talented, and very influential. And we're coming into a time and season where your gifts and your talents are needed. I put a post in the community for my YouTube channel where I linked a video that Servant of God linked to her channel talking about the positioning that God is preparing his children that are anointed for creative industries. So we have callings on our lives, and sometimes the weight of the calling that we have has a tendency to make us feel like we have to be continually maintaining that side of ourselves. I also did a podcast on my what is it? I have it on Spotify and I have it on Anchor. Where I talk about don't make me a trophy wife and put me on the shelf. Anybody interested in the podcast, listen to me carefully. Go to Spotify and look up The Steam to Live the Dream. I have a bunch of podcasts over there. Anyway, with that being said, a working relationship. My dad was watching Rush Hour yesterday. I actually didn't watch the movie because I was doing my hair. But when I saw that he was watching and I walked in the bathroom, I was washing my hair out, and I was thinking to myself, look at the relationship between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker throughout the 3 films. Now, as we know, society kind of has this bromance thing that they kind of push on society. We're not going to go there. But with that element, think about it with you and your God ordained spouse, okay? Jackie Chan's character was very straight-laced, very strict. He did things very aligned, and he thought about things very strategically. There was much strategy. You go through all 3 films, it was very much like that. But when you look at Chris Tucker's character, he was very much easygoing. He would say what he wanted to say. He would do what he wanted to do. And he was street smart. And when I think about that in relation to our God ordained marriages, we are the very aligned, very strategic, we're strategists, we're very on point as the female. But our husbands may be easygoing, operate in ease, but they're street smart because they had to grow up that way, because they had to operate in these places and arenas where we have not gone yet. And they had to be wise and use wisdom as to how they operate, but they had to be able to maneuver amongst other people in a very specific way. They might not be loud and boisterous like Chris Tucker was. He's very loud and boisterous, but they're very observant and they pick up on things that a strategic person like Jackie Chan's character did not pick up on. If you notice throughout all of the films, when Lee's character was doing things, he was very straight-laced. I was here to do a job. My boss told me to come here to do a very specific thing. This is exactly what I'm doing. And he was highly annoyed by Chris Tucker. I hate to tell you this, But some of y'all are begging and pleading to get to your God ordained spouses. But the way that you are, your the way that you're aligned with God, there are certain elements of your God ordained spouse that are going to annoy the hell out of you. Just like Chris Tucker annoyed Jackie Chan in the very first film. It's like he annoyed him, but he was wise enough to know where to go and who to talk to. Your God ordained spouse is wise in that element. There are things that you're going to need that strategy ain't going to be able to figure out. But your God ordained spouse is going to be able to figure it out because he's street smart. He's going to know, I need you to go here. This is where we need to go. I got an informant that I can get that information from. I know that this person knows that person, and that person, I can pull some strings. The Lord showed me in a vision, God, it was sometime like 6 months ago. I had a dream where I was at Target, and while I was in Target, I couldn't purchase what it was I was trying to purchase. I had two things I was trying to purchase. I just picked them up off the shelf, and it was like I went over to the line, and the woman was giving me all this trouble, and she told me go get in the back of the line. I turned around, and there's a line there that was not there when I first walked up, and I was like, oh, okay. I had to get in the back of the line, and I'm thinking it's going to take me all this time. I go over to where she pointed to, which was this other place, and this woman is another woman over there, and I'm like, oh Lord, is this gonna be more problem? But by the time I'm walking over to this other counter, that woman was leaving, and a man was coming to stand in that place. So when I got there, I kindly asked him, look, I don't really need to go through all this, blah blah blah. He said, no, I'm going to do this for you, but I need the key. He needed a key to open the register. He went to the very same person that gave me all that drama and got the key from them like that. What did I say that for? There are things that you, because of the fact that you have a very strategic, a very particular way that you carry yourself, God's made you this way. You're not going to see things in a certain way because your brain doesn't operate that way, but your God ordained spouse does. And he has favor with the very people that you're going to need to get doors open, because he has a charismaticness about him that he can get things done with ease because he knows the right people to talk to. I had a mentor say this to me a long time ago, and it always stuck with me. When you have a woman that is a strategist and a man that knows how to execute, you have a dangerous pair. You're the one that's the aligned strategist. Your spouse is an executor. He gonna figure out how to get the thing done. You're just going to have to follow his lead, even if it looks unconventional and messy to you, unstrategic, out of order, out of line. It's just necessary to deal with the people that he has to cross paths with in order to make sure the things that you need to get done are done. Okay? Now, as we recall in the first film, they were trying to deal with a kidnapping situation. And they were trying to track down certain information about that the guy that had done it, and they were trying to check and figure out who this particular person was. Now, externally, everything looked like it was okay with the people that they were identifying, like it was this person, this looks like it's in this order, but it came out to being somebody that was like a governor or a mayoral person that they had already had a connection with, but they would have never suspected. But it's certain things that Chris did that made people figure out, oh, it's this particular person. And it's certain things that Jackie did that made him figure out strategically who the Korean bomber was. I think it was because it was this blonde haired Japanese guy that did it. And uh, Chris and him ended up getting into a fight towards the end of the film. We all remember that film in the end of the first Rush Hour. But these two had Jackie, or shall I say Lee, and whatever, Detective Carter. Um, they had a very unusual relationship. They will always end up in weird scenarios, falling out of this place, jumping out of that, doing this. God will allow you and your spouse to end up in unconventional circumstances in order to get what he needs done between the both of you. And you're going to be sitting there kind of like, how in the world did I end up in this mess or this scenario when I just wanted to go the simple route? Because God wanted you to operate in that way in order for this thing to come to pass. He didn't take you the straight route. And you ended up jumping out of windows. You ended up having to take a leap of faith. You ended up having to, and it was all, get it, God. You always ended up having to leap out of a building when the building was going to explode. They had to, and it's interesting. It was the strategy that Jackie had on how to get out the building that allotted them the ability to land properly. So you're going to have the certain strategy that your spouse needs whenever y'all are going to have to take a faith leap. Go ahead, God. So every time they had to jump, it was always Jackie that pushed them into doing this jump in a weird way. It's like, we gotta go. I don't care whether it was the first movie, the second movie, or the third movie. They always ended up, it was Jackie that pushed them into taking whatever leap that needed to be made. What happened in the second film? Okay, this is the interesting part. In the second film, we find that you're going to also have to be aware. Yes, there are things that you're going to have to take faith leaps in. There's certain things that are going to happen with your career that is very important to God, but you also have to nurture your relationship. In the second movie, you saw where Carter was upset with Jackie because every time they were supposed to spend time together, they ended up in a police related situation. First thing, they're on vacation. And he brings Carter's thinking, I'm on vacation. Okay, cool, blah, 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 blah. Some of you have been so accustomed because it's been years since you've had any real fun that it's going to be hard for you to put your phone down. It's going to be hard for you not to work on anything. It's going to be hard for you not to do the things that you've been used to doing all this time as you're coming into these relationships. And your spouse is going to be like, I want to take you on vacation. And you're going to be kind of like, okay, but you still may have that tendency or that pull to pick up your phone and write, pick up your phone and record something, pick up your phone and do that type of, because you're used to doing that. And it's going to be that you have to train yourself to be present with your spouse. So he was, Jackie got a call that he needed to go to a bar to check out the guy in that they had been trailing in Japan, and he lied to Carter, telling him, "Oh, we couldn't go do karaoke or something like that." And he was like, yeah, let's enjoy. And he's sitting there like, okay, we're gonna enjoy this type of thing. One thing I would have to suggest to you, do not lie to your spouse about what it is that y'all supposed to be doing together. Don't manipulate them into helping you with work. Because that's what he was doing. He was manipulating him into helping him with work. And if you're used to working all the time, you also know that you're called to the same thing that they're called to, you have to be careful, because it's not that you're trying to manipulate them. It may just be your curiosity will start to pull them into your work. And that's what he was doing. He was pulling him into his case, which later ended up that they ended up getting chased by this woman, ended up thrown out on a what do you call it? What do they call that thing? When it's a siding to a building that's under construction. But they ended up falling through that and all that kind of stuff and all that. And he was like, I can't deal with this. I'm not. You may end up putting your goddamn spouse in a scenario where he might feel like, I don't want to deal with this type of confusion in you pulling them. Remember, Eve pulled Adam into eating the apple. Your husband is supposed to guide you. Just because you're the strategist doesn't mean that they aren't meant to guide you. And you taking control too much could lead them into getting hurt. It could lead them into not trusting your motive, especially if they've previously been manipulated in previous relationships. They may feel they can't trust you if you do those kinds of things. Not that you would do it intentionally. It's just the way that your brain works, because you've strategically been working towards certain things all of this time. The case that Lee was on, Carter wasn't familiar with, but he was still there. And Lee was trying to work while trying to tend. Some of you, there are going to be times where projects that you're working on may seem important to focus on, but your spouse is going to want your attention. Your marriage is important. I heard from Shannon Yvette years ago. She said that when she was in her marriage, the thing that she and her husband were very striving towards what they did in their career, but sometimes the achievements made in their career made them neglect, or she found herself neglecting her children. You can't allow what you're called to do to cause you to neglect the relationship between you and your spouse. Now, after they went through the rousting of the bar and all that confusion and the fight and all that, the next day he had to apologize to him. He said, okay, I apologize, but they still needed to find out more information about something. He wanted to find out about what the bad guy was doing. So Lee convinced Carter to go to a massage parlor. But the massage parlor was owned by the gangster that he was trying to tell, and he didn't tell Carter that. There may be a compelling element that the thing that you're doing, you know you needed to get it done. You know that it's a time sensitive thing, or you feel it's a time sensitive thing. because of the fact that, oh, the Lord has shown you this, that, and the other, and now that you're connected to your God ordained spouse, it almost feels like, well, this should be happening. Now I've got my spouse, he can help me XYZ. But if you manipulate him into doing it, does that benefit you either? So they went in there going into spa, and he's just acting like, oh, I'm treating you, you can get whatever you want. That's a form of manipulation, because he was manipulating him into thinking that they were there just to enjoy themselves, but he was there on a case. You have to treat your union with a level of respect between you and your spouse. You hear a lot of people, I've heard this from females that have been on here on YouTube, and I heard this from an apostle that is a pastor say this. When you're in a relationship with your God ordained spouse, never use sex as a form of manipulation. Don't. To get what you want, to get the thing that you need, to get the things that you need taken care of. Don't ever do that. Remember the word that I gave in relation to disenchanting. Go back and look where I talk about sometimes in certain scenarios, if you are not careful, you may actually start to act like the counterfeit unintentionally, because you're not paying attention, or the thing in which you're desiring, the level of pride within you starts to get the better of you, and you may end up manipulating the situation to your benefit because it doesn't look like what God showed you it should be. So, he gets him to go into the massage parlor, and they go into the massage parlor, and things are going as he's thinking, and they're like, oh, great. And then he finds out, oh, he finally tells him, that's the guy that we're looking for. He's like, that's the guy? You don't want to set your God ordained spouse up in a scenario that, because you think that your route is best, you're operating in a particular way, and because your God ordained spouse, who is your leader in your marriage, he interferes with the way that you're thinking because you went about it the wrong way to make sure that thing occurred. It's a level of communication between the two. If you notice, these two were not communicating properly, which ended up leaving them in a scenario that both of them reminds me of what they said, that the Hebrew boys and the sons of Sceva, they went out there, they got their clothes stripped off of them, and were thrown out. That's exactly what happened to Jackie and Carter. Lee and Carter ended up with no clothes, and were out there in the middle of the median strip with no clothes on. So you don't want to end up in a scenario setting yourself up to be stripped, one, spiritually, of certain power, but the power that is supposed to be between the two of you because you're not communicating properly, when your husband is supposed to be the lead. If you had sat your husband down and actually had conversation of what it was that you were supposed to be doing, and you both were on the same page, maybe you might not have ended up screwing the situation up. You understand what I'm saying? Eve screwed the situation up for all of us by going out there and eating that apple because Satan tempted her. We are in a season and scenario where society is telling us that we are like in this feminist movement. That's not going to work in your marriage. Sorry, it's not going to work. So you being in control of the scenario and the outcome and manipulating and all that, and that's not going to work, because you will end up out on the street, clothes stripped, not even your anointing is stripped, but you may be stripped of your position for a season. I remember Fantasia telling the story of when she met her God ordained spouse, and she screwed up within that first 2-week period and had to be separated from him. You don't want to end up in a scenario that you mishandle your marriage or your relationship with your God ordained spouse, that you end up stripped of your position. And because you're called, the Lord may allow you to go back into the position. But would you like to go back into a wilderness? Because you did not listen to what God was trying to show you in that season. So then they end up back at his chief's place. They end up in an argument. And he's like, I'm going home. Forget you. This was not how this was supposed to go. Do you want to end up in conflict and creating conflict between your spouse if you had just let him in the first place to what it was that you were doing? All of that could have been avoided. You understand what I'm saying? Then he leaves because he forgot his wallet at the massage parlor. But something happened. The woman comes in and she brings a bomb and blows up the room that Chris had been in. You also don't want to end up in a scenario where there could be a threat to your God ordained spouse's life and you're not operating in the right position that could literally make the difference in life or death between you and your spouse. Because the enemy's always going to look to try to create a wedge between you and your spouse. Okay? And you don't want that wedge to lead to one of y'all's premature death. Because that's exactly what the enemy knows, that if he makes you mad enough, you might not cover your spouse in prayer. You may forget, I'm mad today. And God's like, no, today's the day you need to cover him in prayer. Think carefully on that. So they ended up on the boat that night. Chris ends up at the same place that Jackie ends up at, trying to chase Ricky Tan. So God will always lead you both back to where you're supposed to be, and he'll lead you to the right location. You may have to get on the same boat or come to a point of communication between the both of you, but he's going to lead you to where you're supposed to be. They ended up finding each other, and he ends up they end up locating each other on the boat. It was, if you watch the movie, you know what happened. But meanwhile, there's a case with the multi-billionaire that owns the yacht, and then there was a female that Chris was talking to that I think Jackie crossed paths with. There are going to be people that God's going to plant throughout your journey that are going to be there to be your spiritual security. Stephanie P did a video on that. That's supposed to keep you in alignment with the assignment that you're supposed to be operating in, but you may not know who these people are. They're prophetic witnesses, divinely aligned associations that are going to keep you in alignment for the thing in which you're supposed to do when y'all both be going left field. They're going to keep you directed in the right pathways. So what ended up happening is, with everything that happened on the yacht that night, their boss, Jackie's boss ended up sending Chris back to LA. And Jackie said, I'm sorry. This is the point in which apology comes in the factor. A lot of all of that could have been avoided had they had just been honest with each other at the beginning of that whole situation. Some of y'all, you just gonna have to be big little women and admit when you're wrong. So that you can get in alignment with the way that the situation and scenario is supposed to play out. Because when Jackie apologizes, Chris says, come back with me to LA. I know exactly who we can find out more information about this situation for. So they went back to LA and they're checking out something in relation to the scenario, only to find out that the woman that was on the boat with them, she'd come back to LA too. And they found out that she was an FBI agent. And the woman that did the bomb was giving her a payoff because she was associated undercover with the operation, but she couldn't tell them that because they were not involved in the case. So she ended up bringing them both on as um, backup agents. God will align you with the right people to situate you in specific rooms, realms, and scenarios that he will send the prophetic agents, witnesses, and so forth to open doors for you and your spouse, but you got to be in one accord. They couldn't get that assignment until they were in one accord. You got to be in one accord when the certain things come to pass. So, once they figured out this piece of information, I believe it was the next day, something had occurred. I don't remember exactly what it was that led them into a chase that they ended up outside with all of the Japanese Asian people and ended up getting knocked out. When they got knocked out, they were put on the back of a truck. When they got put on the back of this truck, they found out that all the statues in the back of the truck were full of money. I got two things from that. One, when he knocked over the statue, the idols are being knocked down. God showed me years ago that the idols were being knocked down. So he's positioning you and your spouse to be in a place that though you may not understand how he's transporting you into these certain scenarios, it's going to knock down the idols. Next, they ended up in Vegas. Now, Vegas, as we know, this is Sin City. God may be placing you directly in the middle of a place or thing that is dark in order for you and your spouse to bring the light necessary for the transition and the cleaning to take place. The scenario was they were trying to figure out how the money was being laundered. The money was being laundered through the casinos in Vegas. It was a specific casino that was owned by the guy, the rich man that was on the boat. Chris had always said that you want to know what's going on, follow the rich white man. Now, I could make a million different directives behind that. I'm not going to, because I don't got much time on this video. But I'm going to say this, that the Lord is going to create a scenario that is going to pretty much clean the very money that the wealth transfer is going to occur in. It's one of the ministers said it the other day, and I found it interesting. She said, how do you launder money? And due to the fact that this movie talks about